Hello, I'm Kimberly from Buckeye Book Fair, and I'm excited today to be with Mindy McGinnis, Cassie Sewell, Marcy Payne, and Gus the Dalmatian. So today I thought we would do just a short book bit because I'm in love with Mindy McGinnis's books, especially Be Not Far From Me. When I read it, I realized that she has a grit that actually brings the humanity of what people, the hard things that young people are going through. She brings it to life and she helps kids have resilience. And right now, I think kids need a lot of resilience. And Gus is just loving on her as well for that.
I'm still here.
it's it's absolutely perfect. So, Mindy, where did you get your appetite for just reading? Like where did it begin for you? Where did you start loving books and writing?
So, as a child, I grew up on a farm. Obviously, I'm from Ohio. I still live here. I grew up in the middle of nowhere. I still live in the middle of nowhere. It's what I prefer. And I grew up on a farm and I grew up spending a lot of time outdoors. I had toys, but I wanted to be outside, and my toys were rocks and sticks and mud and being in the woods. And when that's what you do, your entertainment is playtime. Your entertainment is imaginative play and making stories up. So that's what I did like all the time. And then when I came inside, I read books. I can't say, I think I can credit my parents with the love of reading. Like it was part of the ritual of bedtime is they read a story to me every night. I always had a story read to me. I could actually read before I went to kindergarten, not because I could read, but well, actually I could because I would memorize the book and then I would follow along as they read. And so I had learned to read, not like exceptionally, but the little like primer that they gave you when you walked into kindergarten, I read it and I was like, yeah, I'm done. And my mom and dad, because I was a horrible insomniac and I still am, my mom and dad would just give me a stack of books and they would put it on my bed and they would be like, you can stay up, but you can't leave your bed. And so that was the rule. I stayed up and I read and I read and I read and I read. And when I finished a book, I would toss it. And I didn't know, like, that's just what I did. I was a kid. I was like 4. So I go to kindergarten and I read the book they handed me. I finished it and I'm like, whoop. And I threw it. And they were like, this is not how we treat books. And I'm like, oh, we don't. I mean, that's when you're done, you throw it. That's what you do. And so, it was just like immediately from the beginning, I was a reader constantly.
I love it. I have a feeling now, like when Cassie walks past your table at Buckeye Book Fair, she's gonna fling a book off. Just
If
yeah,
you finished it, you can. That's the rule. You have to be done.
it has to be done. I love it. So, oh wait, my questions are out of order here. Cassie, why don't you go ahead and ask yours because my page is confusing me.
Sure. I love the book tossing idea. You do, it's a good celebratory thing to do, I think. Some
It
books are
is.
long and some, I mean, yeah, like I did that and I love
Yeah.
that. I might start tossing my books and I don't know, we'll see how my husband feels about it, but they're my books, so I can toss them if I want to, right?
Yes.
All right, Mindy. So you've been identified in interviews as a self-starter.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to young adults who are like stuck during this pandemic?
Oh, yeah, great question. So, I mean, first of all, you're not alone. Yeah, stuck. Stuck is a good word. I think that one of the things that has made the pandemic survivable is the internet. But I also think one of the things that has made it really kind of mind numbing and a little bit dangerous is the internet. So I think that unplugging is really important. I mean, do not get me wrong. I was very thankful for Netflix, Hulu, TikTok during this pandemic and, spend too much time on it already. But I think it's really easy, especially in an app like TikTok or Instagram, where you're just scrolling and you're rewarded for your activity mentally. Here's more of things you like. And you're like, oh, what's next? How many times can this cat miss a jump? Will the dog fall down? Like it's so fascinating. And you keep going. I mean, you can't help it. So I think that it is little tiny rewards every time, but they don't add up. They don't build into anything that is actually rewarding. So I don't think that the internet or social media is a bad thing in any way. I think just like all things, moderation. I also would never recommend that someone read for 10 hours straight. That's hard on your eyes. It's just like, that's also not a good idea. So I just think it's important to practice moderation and also outlets. So inputs, that's what social media is. That's what, I play video games too. So it's like, that's all input, things coming into you. And a lot of it is visual and stimulus and sounds, and it's all going into you. And it's really, really easy to not put anything out because that's work, right? That takes effort. So I think it's really important to make sure that you're also outputting in whatever way you do that, whether you do it through painting, singing, writing, drawing, knitting, crocheting, like it doesn't even matter, whatever you do for output. And if you can get outdoors, super, always. Right now, I mean, I'm in Ohio too, so it's like -12 outside right now. Not going outdoors, you will die. I have actually come pretty close to dying in my own yard one time because I thought I'm tough, and that was a bad idea. But yeah, you have to make sure that you are outputting as well. Otherwise, you really can get like, I almost call it like a mental bloat, because you're bringing in so much and you actually get like overcharged and overstimulated. And it sounds like it was something that would amp you, but me personally, if I'm overstimulated, I get tired. Babies, infants, when they're overstimulated, they go to sleep just as a way to escape. And so I think it's really easy during the pandemic to be a consumer and to be overwhelmed in an underwhelming situation, to be overwhelmed and then like sleep too much, which can cause like depression issues. And then you have anxiety. It's just like, it's kind of a vicious cycle that's really easy to get caught in. So I think you have to be sure that you are also producing and outputting. That's my big advice. Also, connectivity. And I know that that goes against what I just said, but I don't mean like right now, obviously I'm on my computer, but I'm talking to humans and I'm interacting with people. Even if I'm texting with someone, like that's an interaction. I'm on my phone, but I'm making human connections. I think right now, it's just really important to maintain the relationships that we already have and, make some new ones. I just think that always be examining whether you're just pulling in, not putting out, or that sounded really bad. Okay. So you know what I'm saying? Output is important. Yeah. Also have a dog. This is my pandemic puppy. If you have pets, oh my gosh, they're so important right now, aren't you? Yeah, he knows. But yes, I love my animals. I also have cats. They probably won't show up because he's kind of a spotted demon. And he doesn't chase them, but they are just like, why are you here? Our life was great. And then you showed up. So, but yeah, having pets, oh my gosh, they've saved my sanity over this pandemic. So if you're lucky enough to not have any allergies or have the ability to be able to have pets and afford them and spend time with them, it's just been a lifesaver for me.
Yeah, I agree with all of those things. I found my screen time, like, my phone pops up and it's like, here's how much time you've spent, that it's gone up a lot.
Yeah.
And I totally got into TikTok. And
oh, me too.
I didn't want to, but it's just so fun. Like I can't.
It is. Well, and I have to give like credit where credit is due. There are a lot of very funny, very creative people in the world that I would have never encountered if it wasn't for TikTok. I follow this guy now. I think Drennan Davis is his name. And he just puts ties on his cats and have them pretend like they're having business meetings. And I'm like, this is the best thing I've ever seen. Right. And it's just like, I'm in love with it. But, you can get lost like really easily. So I think with those things, it's perfectly okay to be involved in them and be invested in them. I am too, but just like even set a limit on your phone. It's like, if I'm on here for an hour, cut me off. Don't let me keep going, because you will. It's very easy.
Oh yeah, for sure. So kind of playing off of that, how do you think young people can learn to persevere and accept their reality. And right now, that reality is kind of uncertain and weird and strange.
Yeah, it is. I think that allowing that it's okay to escape sometimes is really important. So I just talked about like social media maybe not being a great escape, and it's not. It can be, like, if you're watching cats and dogs and roosters and stuff, like that's fun. But you know, you might be swiping through that and then you get a picture of someone that is like super, super attractive and has a very beautiful body popping around in their bikini, and then you go, oh, and you don't feel good anymore. And that can really like wear down on you. So I think like super safe escapes, like reading. I mean, reading isn't always safe, don't get me wrong, but I think that it is something that, I mean, people, you can be easily upset by things that you read, of course, but I actually think that's important. So, you know, that's something I'm happy to talk about as well. I've come across some people that are not fond of me or my books and think they should be banned. So that has been something I've been dealing with this winter, which has actually been quite the joy for me, to be honest. But I think that, you know, saying, you know what, I got to check out of reality for a minute here and I need to read this book. And if it's a fantasy and I'm just escaping, that's totally cool. If you're like, I need to not really be present in my reality, but I like reality, you know, you can read a contemporary book. I think that, again, with all things that balance, I think constant escape is never good. I do think that accepting that we are where we are is important, because we are where we are. I mean, we can't wish it away. Let's put it that way. We can't wish the pandemic away. We got to figure out how to function within it. And, you know, our ancestors figured out how to make the wheel and fire. So, you know, they made it, and we will too. We just have to kind of, you know, batten down our mental hatches in some way and just be like, okay, like this is, I think, accepting this new normal, which sucks. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not like, all right, guys, grab your bootstraps, let's go. It's really hard, but it also is. And denying it or ignoring it is not going to do you or anybody else any good.
That's good. I found my, yeah, that's really good. I found my way through my questions, and I think what is so cool is, you know, you're very comfortable when you speak, and I like the way that you're just you and not, you know, being super business-like. But we went to like the last deeper questions, because the first one was, did you get murdered by trying to finish your manuscript in December? Because that was a real concern. I was really worried about you.
Yeah, I mean, it was murder or be murdered. Like, that's kind of where I was in December. I did finish it, and I turned it in. I had a due date of January 1, and my Lord, I was writing like a house on fire, and it was, and I got it done. Like, I have my agent actually has told me that I am one of her only clients that has never had to ask for an extension, or I always hit my deadlines, basically. And my editor has thanked me for that repeatedly. My editor is wonderful. He's just like, here's what I need, here's your deadline. And he's like, I know that you are just going to go away and come back in 4 months and be like, here's a book. And he trusts me to do that. And my agent trusts me to hit all my deadlines as well. So they do let me just kind of freely go about and do the things I need to do. But that work ethic, I mean, I grew up on a farm, and it's one of those things where it's like, well, you know, if you don't load the stove, nobody else is going to, and you'll freeze to death. So like, you learn that really fast. If you don't work today, you might not have food tomorrow. And so that's one of those things that it's like, I'm still shocked. This is what I do for a living. I was putting together the tour for my book that comes out in March. And I had set up some things on my own, and then I sent that to my publicist, who was setting up more national things. And she hit me back and she was like, Mindy, you already have like 15 things set up for the month of March. Like, how many things do you want me to add? And I was like, I don't care. I fly around the country and I talk about myself. How is this a job? Like, go ahead, put more things on there. You know, like this is ridiculous to me. I grew up throwing manure around on pitchforks. So it's like, I don't remember what the question was. Yeah.
Well, it was just, did you not get murdered?
Oh yeah, no, I'm here. I'm good. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I'm super excited about that. And that was was that finishing the sequel to
Yes.
the initial insult?
So no, it wasn't finishing it. It was finishing my book for 2023,
Oh,
which I'm
okay.
super excited about. When you work in traditional publishing, you're usually working about a year and a half ahead of time. So the last laugh, which is the sequel to the initial insult, comes out in March. So that's the book that I was planning the tour for, and that comes out March 15th, which I am super excited about. That is the sequel to the initial insult, and man, I'm ready for it to get out there. But the book that I was working on is my release for 2023, which is called The Long Stretch of Bad Days.
Ooh.
And it's a murder mystery. It's like straight up murder mystery. It's probably my first one that is just straight up contemporary murder mystery. And it's about a girl who has a podcast and lives in a really small town. And she doesn't have enough history credits to graduate. She discovers this through a flawed error at the school. And so she decides to investigate what's called the long stretch of bad days from their small town in a week in the 90s, when the town was hit by a tornado, suffered a flash flood that drowned every single dog at the county pound, and the only murder that has ever happened in the history of the town occurred all during the same week. And that murder has gone unsolved. And so she tries to investigate the long stretch of bad days and ends up discovering that there are links between all three of these events. And there was a teenage girl that disappeared that no one has ever mentioned or talked about. And she's like, hey, that's not okay. And so it is really exciting. I am really looking forward to getting that one out. And that's for like winter of 2023. So if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. Cool. I'm glad. And you're going to have to wait like a year.
I like that. That's awesome. So what's your favorite genre? You know, because you have everything from like a little gothic to contemporary. You have like the historic stuff happening and lots of fantasy, but what's your favorite?
To write or to read?
Oh, both. I would
Both?
like to know
Okay.
both.
Cool. So I read really widely, which is why I write widely, but I read widely. I read nonfiction. I mean, like, you name it, I read it, but I don't read romance. Like, it's just not my style. And people ask me like, why not? And I'm like, well, I am divorced. So it's like, that's part of it. But also it's just like, I worked in high school for 14 years and I still substitute there. And I see a lot of young people, and I think me too, like, this is not a modern theme, but I see a lot of young people that are, and I was the same way in the 90s, you know, you're looking for that perfect man. Like, I am still looking for Jamie Fraser, right? Like, he doesn't exist. And so it's just like, where are you, Jamie? You're not real. And so it's like, I love that man and I want him to be mine, but he doesn't exist. And so I think that, and it's not I'm not bashing the romance genre, because obviously I'm a fan of escapism, but I think that if you read a lot of romance, it can be really hard to settle for a living, breathing human man. And so I think that, all credit to men, they are what they are, and they're not Jamie Fraser. So I think that reading romance can actually just kind of make you feel really bad sometimes. So I just don't read it. Not a huge fan of sci-fi. I will read sci-fi. I have really enjoyed some sci-fi, but it's not something I'm gonna like naturally go to. But pretty much literally everything else I will read. And when it comes to writing, I am the same. Probably never gonna write romance. It would be hilarious if I tried. But and probably not gonna write sci-fi. But everything else, yes, gladly will write it, we'll read it, we'll watch it, whatever the case may be. Yeah. And I don't really have a favorite. I will say the hardest thing to write is fantasy. When I wrote fantasy, that was by far the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life, was writing fantasy.
Wow. Why was it hard for you?
It's so hard because when you're writing, so in my case, I was writing high fantasy, so it's completely disconnected from our world. So when you're writing high fantasy, if I'm writing a contemporary, I can say to you that my main character drives a Maserati and only wears Prada. And you immediately can assume 15 to 50 things about this person.
The scheme is there.
And I don't have to, yeah, exactly. I don't have to fill that in for you. If I tell you that my main character is the last surviving female of the Indiri tribe, that means nothing to you. I have to tell you why that matters. I have to tell you what it means. I have to explain to you why that is so significant. I have to explain to you the parameters of the culture. I have to tell you everything. And I have to make it interesting. So it's like if someone sits down in front of you and is like, now let me catch you up to my life up to this point. You're like, oh. And that's what it's like when you're writing high fantasy for a cast of 15, 20 people. So that's hard. And I always thought, gosh, fantasy, that's great because, there aren't any rules. You can make up everything. You can get away with anything. And you can, but you have to explain why every time. And so it's hard. It's really hard. That was by far the most difficult thing that I've ever attempted to write was fantasy. Although I know we're here to talk about Be Not Far From Me. And I will add that my fantasy books are the longest books I've written. They're each about 100,000 words piece. So Given to the Sea and Given to the Earth is my fantasy series. Be Not Far From Me is the shortest book I've ever written. So it's 55,000 words. It's like half the length of one of my fantasy books. Equally difficult because of the fact that my main character is absolutely alone for 99% of the book. There's no one for her to talk to. And the only things that can happen when someone is alone in the woods, like in a survival story, there are only so many things that can happen. Weather, injury, animals. That's it. Those are the only things that can happen. And so when you decide this is what I'm going to do, you've immediately hemmed yourself in super tight. Yeah. So that was really, really hard. Very, very difficult to write.
How did you develop Ashley?
Ashley's just kind of me. Like, if I'm being honest, people ask me that all the time. They'll be like, which character of yours is the most like you? And I didn't really have a good answer until I wrote Be Not Far From Me. So she is very much like me. I grew up like in a nuclear family and like, all my needs were met and everything. And that's not necessarily true for Ashley, which needed to be the case for her in order for her to have some of the needs that she had, filled them in her own way that gave her her survival instincts. But a lot of the stories from Ashley's childhood are actually mine. So like when she follows the buzzard that's pacing behind a raccoon that's dying from distemper and she shoots it with a 12 gauge because she doesn't think it's fair. Like I did that. That was something that I did because I was just like that poor raccoon. And I was like, I don't know, 12, 13. And I was just like, nope, this is unfair. I'm stepping in. So, some of those things that, a lot of the things in Be Not Far From Me are actually from my own experiences and my childhood. So
you get to learn how badass you really are. That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I can't say that I could survive as long as she does, but I would be, not if it was cold. Now, that is one thing, like I'm pretty badass, but if it's under like 50 degrees, I'm just like, someone lay on top of me and keep me warm. Like I need 4 dogs and 5 cats and 3 people and I'll lay on the bottom. I just need to be warm. Like, I don't know why, but yeah, in the cold, I don't do well. Other scenarios, I think I could last, I'm going to give myself 4 to 5 days. I think I could make it.
I so want to put a spoiler question, but I'm not going to. I just thought of it but I won't. I'll ask you privately. But
okay.
I loved the book, and I thought she had amazing resilience, and it's really cool to put the connection together that you and Ashley are similar.
Quite similar, yeah.
Now you have a really great blog, and your newsletter is nice. So I'm curious if you can tell all of our guests who are watching a little bit about how to get involved and how you can be reached for workshops and
sure.
A little bit about your blog.
Absolutely. So I have a blog and a podcast called Writer Pants on Fire. And I started the blog back in 2011 because when I wanted to get published, there weren't a lot of resources for aspiring writers. There weren't a lot of places that they could go and figure out, like, how do I do this? And all I wanted, like, there were some places, but it was about the industry. It was about how to break into the industry, and that's cool. But all I wanted was to sit down and talk with a published author, like, how did you do it? What did you do? How did you become such a good writer? And that wasn't available online. So I started my blog in 2011. And I interview other authors, and I just ask them how this happened. And, at first it was just like me and my friends and like people that I had met online that were my critique partners. But then I started, things grew, a podcast became a thing. And I started the podcast, I think 3 or 4 years ago. And now it's just like crazy. There aren't that many writing podcasts. So like if somebody is doing a podcast tour, their publicist will reach out to me and be like, hey, I had Elizabeth George last week. I mean, that's insane. She's insanely famous. And I've had people, T. Jefferson Parker, whose books I was reading when I was in high school. And like he came onto my podcast, and I'm just like, hi, it's a really cool feeling when you get to talk to these writers that like I've been reading since I was a kid. And then also like aspiring writers and people, sometimes like self-published people will reach out to me and be like, hey, I would like to be on your podcast. And there are times like if I'll look at their book or I'll look at their website or their social media and I'll be like, yeah, like you seem interesting. Let's go. I had a guy on the podcast that has a self-published book. And he set out to ride he was a cyclist. And he set out to ride his bicycle around the entire perimeter of the United States. And he failed. Like he only made it across like 4 states. But he wrote a book about it. And it was like so interesting. And I had him on the podcast, and like I felt it was one of the most interesting conversations that I had like all year. So Writer Pants on Fire is the blog and the podcast. So those are for people who want to write and want to find out how writers have done it. And it's also for readers. So it's for people that want to have that glimpse behind the curtain for the authors that they love, and they want to know how they work and how they operate and things like that. I also have a newsletter. So if you just go to mindymcginnis.com, and there'll be a pop-up and it'll say, hey, do you want to sign up for my newsletter? And when you sign up for that, you get a free short story that I wrote, like, I don't remember when, but I really love it. So it's a short story that was published in an anthology, and I retain the rights, so I'm able to give it away for free when you sign up for my newsletter. And the newsletter has a section at the top that is for readers, and it's about me and what's going on with me and books that are coming out. And I do cover reveals and I do giveaways and lots of pictures of Gus and the cats and things like that. So I have come here. So that's in the reader section. And then the bottom section is for writers. And it'll just kind of have like this was happening on the blog and the podcast this month. And it'll catch people up with that. And I do school visits like all the time. I love doing school visits. I am in Ohio, and I am like smack dab in the center of Ohio. So I can get anywhere in Ohio in about 3 hours. So I do travel for school visits, and I'm happy to come to schools and talk to kids and classrooms, writers groups, adults, libraries, like whatever. And I keep my prices very reasonable. I grew up, I didn't meet an author until I was one. So it's like I go into the green room at my first author convention, and I'm like, it was just panic mode because I'd never met an author. I grew up in a really, really rural, like poor school district. And so I try really hard to make sure that I can get to those districts as well. So don't think that you can't afford me, reach out. And I can talk about my own books. I can do writing. You need to get out of my laundry, sir. Yeah. I can do writing workshops, like whatever. I will do like pretty much anything, and I'm always happy to be accessible in that way. So yes, my newsletter is at mindymcginnis.com, and then you can contact me through mindymcginnis.com as well. And I'm on Twitter and Facebook. And Instagram. Twitter and Facebook are the best places to reach me. I'm also on TikTok, but I haven't really figured out TikTok yet. Mostly, I have a great video of Gus following me constantly everywhere around the house, and that's pinned, and that's about it.
I love it. I'll make sure that all of the links are below for this as well, so that people can immediately get to you. Well, thank you so much for spending this evening with us, and I'm just excited to read your next book, which is The Last Laugh. And we're looking forward to seeing you again soon at Buckeye Book Fair.
Yes, absolutely. I had a wonderful time at the one this year. I sold out of every single book. Like, it was amazing. It was a wonderful turnout.
Good, good. We love to hear that. Awesome. Cassie, Marcy, any other questions?
No, I don't think so. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I don't have any questions, but thank you so much. This was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I love doing stuff like this. I sit at home all day, so this is good.
Well, we'll do it again sometime.
Cool.
Awesome. All right, guys. We'll see ya.
Thank you.
Thanks.